You're listening to the Love Your Neighbor podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Links podcast. This is Becky Blue. I am honored again to be sitting in Pastor John's chair. And this is a special day for me because I've got a good friend and a good neighbor, which completely fits the theme of the Links podcast. So I'm excited for all of you to meet a man who lives in my neighborhood with his lovely wife and daughter. And he has a great story about how he landed in Brandon, South Dakota. And so we're going to hear about that for sure. But he's also done some wonderful outreach work in the Minnehaha County area, Sioux Falls, and is engaged with things of a volunteer sort, of course, in Brandon, like many of us are. But he's also an author and has a really intriguing new book. So we'll get to that as well. So anyway, without further ado, I want you to meet my friend and neighbor, Bill Earley.
Becky, great to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm surprised we didn't carpool over here.
I know. Sorry. I told him I had to get my hair done afterwards.
Right,
so
there you go. And if, for those of you just listening, I can just describe, I have flowing curly locks.
Let's go with that today.
Let's go with that.
Okay. So Bill, I've told this story many times when you're not even in the room because I love the story so much of how you and your family ended up in South Dakota and specifically Brandon. So if you would share that, that'd be awesome.
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me on this morning, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to our neighbors, our greater neighbors in our wonderful community. And I say wonderful community, and I mean that most sincerely, because my wife and I, native San Diegans, both born and raised there, went to high school there. She went to UCSD. I went to the other SDSU. And you know, we really had a wonderful life and existence there, until ellipse, ...
Yes.
Our daughter turned 6. We're older parents. Our daughter turned 6, and we realized, I was spending a lot of time on airplanes, going to and from Washington, D.C., Sacramento. My professional career was quite demanding, and it just wasn't the life that we wanted. Plus, in a number of ways, we felt that as much as we love our friends and family back in California, the life there became hard in ways that we just felt it wasn't healthy for us or for our family. And so we actually, we sat down, we each had 3x5 cards. We were each given 5 3x5 cards, and we sat down and we made criteria and we did a nationwide search. Where were we going to land as a family? And so we did our research, and then we sat down at Liberty Station at this lovely Italian restaurant and just had a wonderful evening of conversation and goal setting and just really being thoughtful about our approach. And we would play the cards back and forth in terms of why this community, why that community. And then we narrowed it down and we decided to go on really community interviews. So we went to go visit communities and we got here to the Sioux Falls area, and particularly with an eye towards the Brandon Valley School District, which, of course, as you know, Becky, having had some kiddos go through that district, and they're all wonderfully successful and just good people, we focused on that. And 126, here we are. We are pre-COVID refugees into the region and really came here with the idea of just embracing and leaning into the community, but not changing it, because it was wonderful before we got here, and we just want to be part of that. So not here to change things, not here to California-ize, if I can just completely butcher the language that way, but just be part of our wonderful community. And we don't look back, and we've been back a couple of times, but this is home. When we get on a plane coming back here, we're happy to be headed home.
That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's what we want for the people who come in, that they become part of the community. So what does it mean for you, or what does it look like for you to be part of the Brandon community?
Great question. So when we first got here, I was on a listening and learning tour, meeting with various different people throughout the community and just trying to understand. I mean, I was retired. I have failed miserably at retirement, by the way, a couple of times.
And just for our listeners, what's your professional background?
So I'm a lawyer, went to Georgetown Law School, was with a very big law firm out of Southern California and was a partner in that firm and was always involved in the community. And then that firm merged a couple of times, and now my former partners are part of what is now called Denton's, which is the largest law firm in the world, including with 3,000 Chinese lawyers. My Mandarin is not so good, so I figured it was time for me to jettison out of there. And so then I got into nonprofit executive leadership and was regional CEO of the Red Cross. And then was recruited away to work for Gary and Mary West. They're billionaire philanthropists out of Omaha. There's something about Omaha that just breeds all these billionaires,
right?
I guess,
I
Buffett
agree.
and the West, and working on successful aging for our nation's seniors. And that was the time when we lived 10 miles away from my office. By the way, for you golf fans, and I know there are a bunch in this region, my office at Gary and Mary West at the West Health Institute overlooked the 10th green on Torrey South.
Wow.
So gave that up to come here. So I know
Did you see Tiger walk by a few times?
I have seen insane galleries walking by. Yeah. And usually it's like, oh, Tiger must be out there. But yeah. So anyway, but we've always, as a family, we have always felt that community service is critically important, and also raising our daughter. I mean, she is very blessed as we are. And so we think that it's important for her to see how her mom and dad are as it relates to community and to considering the fact that there are others that we can help in many different ways. So, as COVID was going on, Mayor Ten Haken reached out to me and asked me to take a look at a startup that was going on in downtown, and that was our community triage center called The Link. Mm-hmm. So for the last year and a half, I've been the executive director of The Link, and I just walked away from that few days ago. Actually, it was last week. My contract expired there, and that is going famously well, and working very closely with some of our partners in that transition, which is the right thing. And also I serve, so that was great. And, we can get into that as much as you want, but just the need around sobering, withdrawal management, mental and behavioral health crises, huge need in our community. Our community is special in many ways. Unfortunately, we cannot avoid the reality of what those needs are. And I think we're addressing those and devoting resources and talent towards those. And also I serve on the board of the Brandon Tennis Association.
Ooh, yeah.
That's somebody that I know sitting across from me talked me into that. And I love that, having been a lifelong tennis player, and now my daughter is a several-time Lynxville participant and wants to now teach the summer program.
Evie's in it for the long haul. We love it. We're going to be
is.
cheering her on when she's playing for the Lynx on the big courts, and it'll be great.
Anyway, so we're just happy to be here and happy to serve, and I think that's kind of just how our approach is.
Mm-hmm. Just speaking about Evie for a second, how old is she now?
So our daughter is 10, a fourth grader.
So when you think about Evie, and I'm guessing you are here for the long haul, what are your dreams for her? Not just from a community standpoint, but even her larger worldview and.
Yeah, really great question, Becky. As a parent, you are very aware that you want your child to be as safe and protected as much as possible, but at the same time, they can't pull themselves out of the world. They need to be, in the world. Maybe not necessarily, as we like to say, of the world, but she's definitely in the world. And I think that she's just a bright light for things that are good. And let me just share, since we're here at Celebrate and engage in this podcast here, I will share a story I think that some of the viewers and listeners will appreciate. one day she was saying something and I couldn't quite hear. Must be my advanced age. I think my ears were not really picking up on what she said. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey. What did you say? What did you say?" And she said, "Dad, that's okay. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to God."
Oh.
And I thought, okay. So I think for us, for Ginger, her mom, and we feel that some of the best things that we can do for our daughter is to expose her to what is good, what brings goodness and light, and a strong foundation for her future. She is a child, I believe, that can really do anything. She currently informs me that she wants to be a vet, and has already determined that one of our vacations we need to go to Ithaca, New York, because that is the home of Cornell University, the #1 vet school in the nation. Of course, I look at that, and the next thing I look at is not like MapQuest on how to get to Cornell, but instead, okay, what's the tuition?
Oh my gosh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. She is definitely a bright light, and she's a bright light in my family's life as well.
Thank you.
So let's pivot a little bit. Something we definitely have in common is we have both recently written a book. So what are the chances that people who live like a block away in rural South Dakota have both written a book? Yours, as opposed to mine being nonfiction, you are fiction, but almost a little too real, maybe. So tell us about the book and what made you write it.
Thank you. The book is called The Coin.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to hold it up. I don't know if people can see it here.
Well, let's both hold it up. There we go. It's The Coin. My publisher is Salem, so Salem Media, and they, of course, are a large Christian media conglomerate. The Coin, in a nutshell, it's a work of dystopian political fiction, and it is in a post-World War III world where China and her proxies reign supreme. Freedom-seeking patriots are being hunted, while the holder of the coin maintains the ultimate power of life or death. So just kind of your light reading, pre-going to bed kind of stuff. And
yeah, well, we've had it at our house, and I'll be honest, I haven't got through the whole thing yet. But my husband, who reads that, talk about that genre. Like if somebody's reading other similar authors.
So I would say, clearly, The Coin gives a nod to George Orwell and 1984 and, Bradbury and others, Fahrenheit and all, Atwood and some of the others who have had great success. And I wrote this, okay, so here's, again, the reality, and it gives you maybe an insight into what goes on at my house. So I had about a dozen different creative projects that I had on a list and some brief discussion about them. And I gave them to my wife, Ginger, whom you know very well. Mm-hmm. I said, hey, do you mind taking a look at this? Tell me, what are your top 3 or maybe even your top 1? What do you think I should be working on? And this was as COVID was hitting, mm-hmm. and it's like, okay, I'm retired. Time for me to settle down, have the Labrador Retriever sitting there with the fireplace going, kind of Norman Rockwell-esque kind of author existence. And she immediately picked The Coin. Mm-hmm. And frankly, it wasn't even in my top 3 that I wanted to work on originally, at least out of the chute. And I said, well, why this one? And she was just adamant about it. She goes, timeliness. And so I wrote this in early 2021, and now we're in early 2022. And just putting it in context of kind of world events, just this past week, we had, the Chinese spy balloon go floating, kind of meandering around through the United States.
Came right over South Dakota.
Yeah, wasn't really meandering, in my opinion, and kind of knew where it was going. But anyway, so The Coin really is a think piece, and it's designed to get people to think around what are the decisions and what are we prioritizing now and how that might lead to a future that might not be so bright. And you mentioned, where I had mentioned your children who are wildly successful and my daughter being young, and hopefully we can leave a world for them that that still has the level of freedom that we have enjoyed, Becky.
Absolutely.
And I'm concerned about that. And so anyway, so this is my my first novel. Like everyone from California, I wrote a couple of movie scripts because you never know when you're going to run into a movie producer. You just pull it out of your back pocket. Hey, here's my movie script. But this is my first effort at writing a novel. There's also a Christian angle to it. And I really market it more as a dystopian political thriller, but there definitely is a Christian angle to it. So I hope people will give it a read. And
how's the best way for people to get it?
So a lot of different ways. I mean, first of all, if they're here locally, I've had some book signings, and they can follow me on social media, either on Facebook or on Twitter. And my Twitter handle is @BillEarleySD, which of course worked either in San Diego or South Dakota,
Handy.
right?
Handy.
And then they can also go to my author website, which is WTEarley, EARLEY.com, WTEarley.com, and they can go there. So it's available through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I have a few books at my house.
Sure.
You have a few books too?
Oh, yeah.
Turning?
Boxes.
Beautiful. By the way, for those people who don't know, and I'm just going to flip the tables on you just a little bit, but you blessed me with the opportunity to read Turning before it came out. And I just was thrilled about just, especially having been in the aging space. And I know that you professionally, have been in that space as well. I would just commend people who really want to better understand that next chapter in life and to go through it. And frankly, I think from either a Bible study or, a book club, it's a beautiful, beautiful book juxtaposed against my, light and airy treatment of our potential dystopian future. So,
well, and I was just going to say, I think your book is a great conversation piece as well, even though it's a novel. And so it would be fantastic if there were a group that wanted to get together either at a church or coffee shop or whatever and read your book together, and then the kind of social political discussions that could arise out of that would be super rich.
Thank you. And I'm guessing we probably have to wrap pretty soon, but I was a bit pleasantly surprised that some folks that I respect very much that don't necessarily share my political views, but I don't pick my friends, and certainly pick your family members based on their political views. But I was pleasantly surprised that some people who didn't necessarily share my view of things appreciated this book and actually reviewed it very favorably, because we all agree, no matter what political background or what our values are in some ways, we all agree this is a future we don't want.
Exactly.
So whatever we can do to avoid it, but in order to avoid it, you need to understand, well, what are we trying to avoid? We need to not, to go back to what we said a few minutes ago, we need to not meander our way around. We need to be very thoughtful about where we're going and love our neighbors. And love our neighbors.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor. Links.
Absolutely. Love your neighbor. And I think there's 2 more books in this series coming out.
They are. So currently working on The Coin 2. People ask me, well, do you have an idea? Do you have an outline? I was like, I have an outline. I also have a story for the first outline for the first book. Took it with me hunting into the Black Hills, left it at the Custer Lodge out there, and never to be seen again. So I just banged out this first one. I actually wrote it. I mean, the key, just like in everything, it's the editing. And one other thing, as a lawyer, you write a lot, but you don't write like this. Well, some lawyers, I should say, write fiction, but usually those get thrown out of court. But you write. One good thing about this as a lawyer is I didn't have to worry about the right or wrong answer. This is my world. I get to create it the way I see it. And again, in all seriousness, hopefully creating discussion. That's the purpose of this, really. I'm not in the prediction business, but I'm in the business of wanting people to understand if we don't do things more thoughtfully, perhaps, or if we can't find a way to come together, we seem to find a way to snipe at each other a lot. We need to bring a lot more love to the table. We need to bring a lot more patience, understanding However, we need to stand strong. I mean, in some cases, really, we need to stand strong around what is good and what is righteous and what is not.
Thank you. I would agree. And just before we close, what age do you think might this be appropriate for?
So definitely high school and above.
Good.
However, I will tell you, I am reading it with my 10-year-old. She says she claims it's her favorite book from her favorite author. Sorry, Becky. I know yours is. It's got to be second. But I am her dad. But we're reading it. She's 10. So we're reading it together. There's no bad language. There's no sex involved in this. Sorry, people who want that. There are other authors that they handle that plenty. But there's no need for that. I mean, there's enough going on. And I wrote it the way I like to read, and that is quick, hard-hitting chapters that kind of move you along the story. And there is a very significant Siouxland, if I may borrow that phrase, Siouxland presence in the book, but it's also international in scope. I've traveled internationally quite a bit, including into China and other places. So hopefully people will give it a read and give it a review, and hopefully along the way might have some good discussions and enjoy the journey.
Exactly. I mean, this book is a gift, and anytime you can get people talking amongst each other about important topics, it's really valuable. So, as this time with you was, I always learn something new when I talk to you. So thanks, Bill, so much. And thanks to all our listeners. And pick up a copy of The Coin and be sure to share the Links podcast with your neighbors. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on the Love Your Neighbor podcast. The purpose of the Love Your Neighbor podcast is to build community one conversation at a time. You can help us build that community by sharing the podcast on your social media channels and rating our podcast on whatever platform you're listening from. Another way is to let us know of any neighbors who have a story. Go Links!